Hello there, and welcome to the tour of the beginner class personal transport, the 7th vehicle in my Wimpomania line of vehicles. My name is Wimpoman, and I am the chief designer, chief builder, chief architect, and of course chief dumbass behind the beginner class update project. Okay, so this is another update build, as I said in the intro. So first I'm going to show you the original vehicle. And this over here is not it. Technically, this is Mark III. Let's pause, Alt Tab. Here is the Mark I beginner class. So like the starter class shuttle pod, the beginner class was first built in an old game called StarMade. I always like to make the point that anyone who has ever called Empyrion Minecraft in space has simply never played StarMade, because look at it. I mean, it's not quite the same, but it's stylistically similar, I would say. So this was built again in StarMade. So the story behind the starter class shuttle pod was that the starter class was supposed to be the so I was planning to run a server. And the starter class was going to be the ship given to every new player, and every time you respawn, if you didn't have a ship, you would get the starter class shuttle pod. And the idea with that is, when I played the game, you started with just a hand tool in space. And in order to build your first ship, you got a few blocks. I think it was something like 10 hull blocks and a core block and like a smattering of thruster blocks and power blocks, but that was about it. So you had to kind of cobble something together out of what you first got when you spawn, which would give you something. So up here is a turret. So you might not be able to see exactly how that turret is made, but this base is 3 blocks long. It's then 2 blocks tall and has a barrel 2 blocks long. So the stuff you got at the start would build you a ship that's roughly the size of that turret. And then you'd have to fly over to an asteroid to get more stuff to try and build something bigger. So I wanted to do away with that and give people something to start with. Now the idea of the beginner class, I was going to be selling pre-made ships, similar to how we have pre-made ships in Empyrion, and this was going to be the first one that was available to the players. So there's the Mark I. The mathematically inclined among you will notice that I've called this the Mark III and that one the Mark I, and there's a Mark II missing. Well, that was built in Space Engineers, and I don't have a version to show you or even a screenshot of it, unfortunately. But like this one in Empyrion, it was built at a 1-to-1 scale of the original in StarMade. StarMade has a block size of 1 meter cubed, whereas in Space Engineers and Empyrion, the small grid size is a 0.5 meter cubed. Now the starter class shuttle pod that I've then built in both Space Engineers and in Empyrion were block for block. So if the original in StarMade was 5 blocks wide, so was these, the Mark II and the Mark III. But the beginner class, if it was 7 blocks wide, it became 14 in Space Engineers and Empyrion. Now, the beginner class was supposed to be the next step up from the starter class, seeing as it was the first one available to buy. Now, this starter class shuttle pod in Empyrion is not how the starter class shuttle pod in StarMade was. As I said, this is block for block rather than 1-to-1 scale. So the initiate class shuttle pod that I have here, the initiate class personal shuttle is actually more like what the original starter class was. Single seat and a pretend make-believe bed is how the original starter was. So the equipment on the beginner was supposed to be one up from that. So as we go and have a look around in a minute, you'll see that there's not just a bunk, there's also a head and shower and a sink. So yeah, that was meant to be one of its next step up kind of perks. It's also obviously bigger, more durable, can carry a bit more, has more fuel and all of that jazz. So there you go, that's the story behind the original. I'm not going to go inside because, as you'll see when we have a look at the updated one, not a lot has changed. Some block shapes, some thruster locations, the pod shape has changed a little bit. So there is a story about what the next ship is going to be, and I'm going to do this shape as a warp drive pod. But that will be on the next ship, and I will talk about that in the other info at the end. So, now we've talked about the originals, let's take you through this updated version, starting with its role and its task equipment. Okay, so its role as a personal transport is to shuttle around a single person over a moderately long duration. Maybe not years, but probably weeks, possibly. Maybe, well, okay, maybe a week. I'm not sure you'd want to spend any longer than that on board, but, you know, longer than half a day, you know, so, or a day, I should say. And to facilitate that task, so as I said earlier, it has a pretend bed and a pretend shower and toilet head. It also thrusters, so it's a general purpose ship for a single person. So it's got a bit of storage and a bit of weaponry, and it can do a little bit of something, but not much of everything. It's that kind of ship. Right, that's the end of that segment. So the next segment is going to be her propulsion, handling, and lift capacity. Okay, propulsion then, starting with forward propulsion. She actually has 16 medium tier 1 thrusters. So I've used mediums for two reasons. First is the shapes that are available, and second is I wanted to keep the unlock level down a bit as best as I could. So she has, as you can see, 6 in the back of each nacelle and then 4 extras on her stern. Braking and reverse, there are 9. Oh, these are all medium tier 1s, I should have said. You may have got that impression anyway. So, yeah, all of the thrusters I'm about to talk about are medium tier 1s. 3 there are at the front of the pod connector. Obviously 3 on the other one. And then there's a cheeky 3 on top as well. For lateral lateral thrust, there are 9 in total. So there's 5 there on the side of the nacelle. Obviously the other side is mirror image. Again, the mathematically inclined would figure out that there's 4 more. Well, there's 2 there and 2 underneath the pod connector as well. Again, same on the other side. Right then, for descent thrust, she has 8. There's 2 there on her shoulders, and then 2 on her hips, I suppose you would call it. The sort of, it's sort of the top of the nacelle, so that's what we call it. It's where the body meets the nacelle. And then lift thrust. So lift, she has 16 on by default. So as you can see, there's 4 here at the front, same on the other side, and then 4 at the back, and same on the other side. 4 and 4, and then 4 and 4, mathematically inclined, 16. You will also see there are some that are off, and those are set to max lift. So max lift will turn on those 2, the same on the other side, and those 2. So you get a further 8 with the max lift function. No RCSs, and she has a warp drive. Okay, that's going to get on my nerves. Signals off. Right then, ability, starting with its maneuverability, with max lift off, she will accelerate forwards at 37 meters per second squared, braking and reverse 21, lateral is 21 as well, same number of the same type of thrusters, down is slightly less because it's one less thruster, 19, and then lift is 37 because again the same number of the same type of thrusters as forward. However, you turn max lift on and the 37 for ascent turns to 56. Right, so it's agility. Yaw is 24 degrees per second, pitch 22, and roll is 45 degrees per second. So if we turn on max lift, obviously the yaw doesn't change, but pitch goes up from 22 to 26 and roll from 45 to 56. Right then, let's give her a quick test fly. I am going to turn on pilot. No, actually, I'm going to show how she handles with pilot mode off first. So, she's a bit of a heifer, and we'll find out a bit more about why when we get to the construction bit. But there you go, this is how she handles with pilot mode on, because flying with it off was a bit kind of... max speed is, I think 70 is now the maximum, and it's just how long it takes to get there, isn't it now? They've changed it or something. Okay, I'm going to go land back at the flat here-ish bit, and we'll talk about its lift. Okay, I'm all parked up. So, lift. She can operate in up to 5.7 G, that is of course dry weight with nothing in her cargo containers and stuff. She can lift 104 tons in 4G, and the vehicle itself weighs 72.6, so you get to lift 31, actually it's on the screens in here, so an additional 31.4 tons above herself, which, you know, if you yeah, maths, mathematically inclined again. Right, so that's the end of that segment. The next segment is going to be her power, fuel, and air. Now, as usual with my tours, I'm going to tell you about this stuff now and then show you where they are during the interior layout segment. So, power. She has 6 generators of the large flavour. Now, with a shield, she doesn't come with one, but with a shield, she will only require 4. So there is a little bit of redundancy there, but there is no emergency power. It's just if you lose some, you can probably still continue, at least escape. Fuel, she has 30 large fuel tanks and a pentaxid tank. As I said, she has a warp drive. Then for O2, she has 16 O2 tanks, 7 ventilators in total, and she is fully compartmentalized. She actually has 6 compartments, and we will see those as we go around. The interior, I mean. Oh, and O2 stations. She has 2 O2 stations, one on each side of the foyer lock, which is what that little corridor bit is called. Right, that's the end of that segment. So the next segment is going to be her weapons, defences and construction. So weapons then. She comes stock. Actually, let's get the weapons out. So she comes stock with 4 Gatling guns, 2 on the chin, and then 1 on each of the weapon pods on the side. You can probably also see that there are some dumbfire rocket launchers and homing rocket launchers in each weapon pod as well. Plus, since they're not retractable, you would have seen them already, there are 2 Gatling turrets as well. Now, weirdly, you have more weapon coverage rearwards with those Gatling turrets than you do forwards. Forwards, only 1 can fire, but backwards both can. And I figure, I mean, I only really did it for the look, the design, but You could argue, or I could argue, it's actually for drone defense as you're running away. Aye. So that's the weapons. Now there is, and I will cover this more in the upgrading bit, an additional hard point here. That's actually earmarked for a a laser drill, but you can pop whatever you want there. Defenses. So she doesn't come with a shield stock. There is a shield slot available. Again, I will cover that more in the upgrading bit. She does have a small amount of armor, and the armor is kind of all three flavors of block. So depending on where the armor is, it's either carbon composite steel or hardened steel. And construction, which will give you a better understanding of what I mean by the armor, probably. So here is the unpainted version, so you can see what she's made of. Now she does have a hardened steel structural frame, and as you can see, most of it is not visible from the outside. And that's because, and I alluded to it earlier when I talked about how this is a 1-to-1 scale, but the hull of the beginner class is actually 2 blocks thick. I mean, technically 1.5. So if I phase through the hull, you will see that outer block is a full block, and then the inner block is a half slab, you might call it. And we also get to see the structural frame in here as well. Yeah. Now, obviously, there is a bit that's visible from the outside around the cockpit, but, you know, I don't mind that at all. So, yes, all of the outer hull, in fact, is that full block and then a half block in the second block bit. Block. Say block again, Wimp. And here we have a bit of an example of some different armor. So we have some carbon composite around some of the engineering stuff, but there is also some steel, and the steel protects the warp core. The carbon composite is for anything else, kind of, really. No, yes, that's right. And then for the bit that is hardened steel, you may have noticed the dome and the couple of blocks up here. This isn't actually part of the structural frame. It is protection for the core. So there we go. I'll give you another look around just so you can see what it's made of, but it's almost all steel out here. Like I said, the structural frame that runs throughout the ship is hardened steel. And then there is, like I said, a bit of... That's the bunk, isn't it? Yeah. There is a little bit of extra armour around sensitive bits. So... So there's steel around the core and then hardened steel on top. And that kind of stuff. Righto, I think we've had a good enough look at that, I would say. Possibly, probably. Right, so that's the end of that segment. The next segment is going to be her resource gathering, production and storage. So resource gathering, she has none. Although, as I just said, you can put one on it, but she doesn't come with one stock, or anything stock. Production, she comes with a single constructor for survival situation needs. Do you know what? I'm going to turn the propulsion off. Oh, and the weapons. Storage then. It's a relatively long list. So, and again, tell you about this now, show you where they are later, although obviously some is visible. So there is a 500 SU ammo container in the cockpit. There is also a 734 ammo container in each weapon pod, which is what's visible there. Then we have 2 4,000 SU cargo containers in the back. There is a single 625 SU container, which is supposedly a water tank. You know, air quotes, lore. Then there are 2 2,000 ore and wood containers for when you add something that can gather resources. Obviously, without a resource gatherer, they still operate like a cargo container, so why not put the ore and wood controllers in them already? Then there are 6 large, 11 small cargo boxes, 2 mini fridges and 2 armour lockers. Okay, that's the end of that segment. So the next segment is going to be the interior layout and any remaining devices. So this is where I'll show you where all the stuff I just talked about is, but first we'll cover any remaining devices on the outside. So of course as is usual with my ships, they come fully flight regulation lighting compliant. Now with the next ship I'm going to ask a question, but I'm going to say it now just in case anyone's watching and wants to give some input. Thanks to a suggestion by someone who subscribed to one of my builds, they suggest something in the comments, and I think it's Sergeant Rock suggested this, about attaching the running lights, these things here, which I'm about to talk about, attaching them to the landing gear. Now I didn't want that, but I thought about maybe adding the nav lights and the flight strobes. So I'm going to talk about the nav lights and flight strobes and then ask the question, should they be attached to those? Right, so flight regulation lighting, we have running lights. These are on automatically. I will tell you at the end how to turn the flashy flashes off. So keep tuned for that if these annoy you. But these let any observer know that the ship is running, that it is powered. Then we have the nav light, so this is the red on the port side, the white on the stern, and the green on the starboard side, and I will turn those on when we get to the signals bit. Then we have the flight strobes. Those are the bright white flashing lights you see on the wingtips of planes. Well, my ships have them too. It should be white, that one, but I really can't be bothered to fix it. It's still the blue that most other stuff is, so yeah, it'll do. I'm not all that fussed. So yeah, they flash white. These are part of the anti-collision lights, so they're supposed to help other pilots of other ships spot you from a distance. In reality, of course, in the game that doesn't really translate particularly well, but meh. And then we have the anti-collision beacons. Again, I'll turn these on when we get to the signals bit, but we have red ones on top. Actually, there's also one on the back, and then yellow ones on the bottom will flash, and they come on automatically with the thrusters to let you know that the ship could move, is the idea of those. So, now that I've talked about those lights, I will actually ask the question. I can set up signals so that when the ship is landed, the flight strobes and the nav lights are off automatically. But once you take off and the landing gear retract, the flight strobes and the nav lights come on automatically. Like I said, I will ask that in the actual comments on the workshop of the next ship. But for now, if you would like to have your input, put it in the comments below the video. I'm sure I'm going to get none, but you never know. Right, we might as well talk about the LCDs out here. So we have nameplates and registry displays. Now, it might not be quite so obvious where the projectors are for these, so I will point them out. As you can see, that is set up so that you can call your name anything you like. Actually, so I won't embarrass them by showing you the comment, but the Mark IIIA, as this original one in Empyrion was, someone had called theirs, I think it was... no, I can't remember, I'm going to have to look. Oh no. Ignore me, it was a different ship. I remember now which ship it was, but it wasn't this one. Never mind. I thought it was Thunder Force they called it, but that was they called a different ship that. But yeah, so if you want your ship to be named thunder force, you can write it in this LCD screen. The projector is that one just there. Let's move the flattish label out the way. In case you care, intra-star system vehicle. So this vehicle moves internally to a star system, as opposed to something that is interstellar, which travels between stars. Right, so registry displays. Here we have the full registry and the class name. That is being projected by that one there, and the same on the other side. Now that's supposed to be, like I said, it's registry number. This is supposed to keep track of how many beginner classes there are and would be incremental. Of course, don't worry too much about it, because this is an old build. I've already moved away from it now. So because it's an old build, you probably won't get the number of which yours beginner class is. So make something up. So mine, or actually that one would have been 001. This one not so much. So actually I think what I might do, if I can navigate back to it. Right, so the Mark 3B here would be the 211th. So, I mean, again, it doesn't matter, but start at 212. Again, as I always say, if you want to leave it as the number symbols, you can. If you want to put a number there, like your date of birth, you can. Whatever. Your PIN number, if you really want to, for your debit card. Of course, no one's going to know or care, but that's what that is. Now, you may have noticed that there is also this registry here, and you probably have guessed that that is just from there to the end. So that is its full registry, and that is its main registry. These ones are simple to figure out, projected by that one there. Oh, there's also one on the back, projected by that one there. Also another name plate at the back here, projected by that one just there. Now, in case you care, the full registry, Wimpo Manufacturing, Transport Craft Personal, because this is a personal transport craft, Wimpomania 07, blah, blah, blah. So there you go, that's all that means. Okay, I've already pointed out that it has landing gear, so I don't need to do that again. Its detector is there. Now, before I go inside proper, I will show you its Wi-Fi, its wireless connections there. So it's actually in the front two are in the connectors for the pods there. As you can see, there are actually pipes and stuff inside the connectors, but whatever. It does have a third, and the third is right at the back just there. Okay, I'm pretty sure that is everything. Oh, no, hang on. Lights. I didn't talk about the formation lights. So the illuminated orientation panels that you can see dotted around are its formation lights to help it fly in formation with other craft, especially in low visibility situations. And as you can tell, just like the nav lights, it's red on the port, green on the starboard, and white on the stern. Yes. Okay, that is, I'm pretty sure, everything on the outside, so now let's go inside. Oh yeah, of course I turned the signals off, didn't I? I couldn't find the switch then. Okay, that ramp, that door, and the two lights flanking the door are on that motion sensor up there. Obviously the other door on the other side is the same. Thank you. As we go in, we have some equipment, armor locker, O2 station, and a small box for each for tools and extra O2 and armor boosts. The other side is clearly the same. The lights in here, so any airlock is this light green light, a light that's light green. You will recognise that light green light that's light green. It would normally signal where an entrance is to a ship. But something like this is pretty obvious because, you know, it's small enough that you will find a door. So those lights are on that motion sensor in the middle here. As you can see, this is a compartment. So this little area is called a foyer lock because it's not only an airlock, but it's also a foyer for other parts of the ship. You will also see a shield slot up there. Those are carbon composites, so they're easy to remove. And if I quickly phase into those blocks, you will see that the projectors for the labels are also in the middle, so you would need to remove those too. I'm going to go backwards first. Here we have the engine compartment. Some O2 storage. One of the 4K SU containers, so annoyingly you can see a bit of the damage texture through there, but I'm not all that fussed about that. Normally I would be, but meh. So the lights in here are this kind of maintenance orange, and they're on that motion sensor there. As you can see, the CPU extenders and slots for the tier 4s above them. There's a couple of large boxes in here for whatever you might want to put in them. More fuel, since there is accessible fuel tanks in here. And then we have the warp drive with the pentaxid tank and an extra bit of storage as well. One earmarked for pentaxid for more. And then those are really only there for decoration because I like those as vents and those as extra lighting. Of course, you're free to put stuff in them. Not sure what. Maybe extra parts if you lose a thruster. Maybe you got a spare thruster in the box, for example. Ventilator and pipage. So the pipage obviously goes from the pentaxid tank to the shield when it's installed. That door, by the way, is manual. This one is not. It's on that motion sensor there. Then the lights in here are on that motion sensor there. Yup. So here are the ore and wood containers. They're 2K each, as I said. Here we have the pretend make-believe bunk with a light switch. The lights are obviously in there. And a pretend screen. Maybe you can watch Netflix or sit in. And some storage for some personal effects in there. Here we have the shower and head. Annoyingly, because of the glass in the floor, yes, I've given you a floor light, as it were, you actually have to duck through this door because that blocks you. It's really annoying. I can't do anything about it, and I would rather have... So if it felt weird in here not having any windows to the outside at all, and the original... I don't know if the Mark III I went the wrong way. Yeah, the Mark III didn't have any windows in here, but it also didn't have a door blocking off the cockpit. But the Mark I, built in StarMade, actually not just had windows down here, it also had them in the ceiling. So I thought it would be nice to have something that you can see to the outside. So I would rather have that than a door where you don't need to duck through. So anyway, pretend, make believe, light switch is up there in case you care. The light itself is there. Okay. That's a manual door, by the way, as is that. And this one is not. So that door is on that motion sensor there. Sorry, it looked the wrong way. So here is the cockpit. As you can see, there's some stuff in here. 2 fridges, 1 earmarked for meds. Of course, no one's going to know or care if you don't put meds in it. A cargo box, again earmarked for meds. Another small cargo box there. There is the constructor, and there is the cockpit ammo box, the 500 one. Lights in here are on that motion sensor. If you want to keep some light in here on when you sit in the seat, that's what the switch is for. The switch doesn't keep that one on at the front. It turns that one off. And then we have... Oh, I've got some more to show you before... not much, but before I talk about its signals and stuff. But we have some HUD in here, some heads-up displays. As you can see, one is for the lift, one is explaining power save, and then we have the shortcuts, which is just the default keyboard shortcuts for these. I forgot to show you the extra air, which is in here. Oh, and in fact the gravity generator. Forgot about that as well. So it does have artificial gravity, and it's surrounded by some extra O2 tanks. Now none of this is accessible. I've given you accessible O2 tanks in the engine compartment, so I didn't feel it was particularly important. Right, I think... Oh, let me just check. That is everything, isn't it? Yep, that's everything. Cool. So that's the end of that segment. So the next segment is going to be her shortcuts and signals. Okay, device groups as usual starts with main propulsion at the top. So this will turn on all of the thrusters. Oh, you may have seen actually the anti-collision beacons already blinking away because the thrusters were on for quite a while. So it'll also turn on the anti-collision beacons, if I can get my words out correctly. No RCSs, so it doesn't turn anything on like that. So it is just the thrusters and the flashy flashes. Max lift will of course turn on the other lift thrusters. Weapons and shields will turn on all of the weapons and the shields once it's installed, so long as you put the shields in the where is it? Here, no, there, close. The shields device group. Now the fact that the signal is already set up to that device group is why that signal shows as yellow, because it's detecting the fact that I'm set to something which should be on, it isn't. Likewise, the drills, etc. underneath. Now, I've left it named drills, etc. because you might want to, instead of putting a laser drill on it, maybe you put a tool turret on it. So, once you put a drill or a tool turret in the drills, etc. device groups, which is down here, that signal is already set up to that device group, so that will turn anything in that device group on and off. Artificial gravity, of course, is the gravity generator. It comes turned off by default because the chances are you'll be spawning this within some sort of gravity, whether it's a natural gravity well of a planet or a space station, whatever, a base, I mean. Next one down is production. That will, of course, turn on and off the constructor in the cockpit. And then the last of the device group shortcuts is air vents. Now I'm going to cover this in case this is the first tour of mine you've seen, but I'm going to cover it quickly in case it isn't, and you've heard me talk about this multiple times. If we look at the power left and turn oxygen off, that doesn't change because although there's no longer any air being blown into the interior, the ventilator block itself is still on. So I've given you a switch here to turn off the ventilator, and as you can see, it can save you some power if you're in a breathable atmosphere. Yarp. So, moving on to the signals. The first one as usual is power save. That will do the usual. It'll turn off all of the LCDs, no matter what they do. I think... No, it'll leave those on. So the ones that tell you the shield slot will stay on, but everything else will turn off. Also, the Wi-Fi blocks will turn off. Why can I not remember anything else? Oh, the sensors, the motion sensors and levers. There you go. It's all on that screen anyway, but blah. Right, next one down is empty. So I do that because they normally... So with my SVs and CVs, everything is usually in the same order. Some things might get moved about if I need to. So for example, weapons and shields is normally over here. And then drills, etc. is normally there. But I move drills down to move weapons over so that I could attach the shields device group shortcut to the shields device group. If I'd have done it as a signal, you would have had to do that yourself. You're welcome. So, next one down, fixed Gatling guns. So flicking that switch will turn on the Gatling... actually, why not show you? It will turn on... I renamed it. That's why it's not working. I need to resave again. So, it will turn on these, or at least it was supposed to have, so that if you want to take out a drone without wasting too much power, you don't need to turn everything on just to kill a few drones, is the idea. Okay. So, as you saw, the next one down is nav lights. Those are, again, the red on the port, the white on the stern, and the green on the starboard lights that indicate to any observer in which direction you are moving or facing. So going back to the question about should I add them to the landing gear, they are at the moment manual. Likewise, the flight strobes. So bright white, flashy, flashy, one there. One there. Same on the other side. Again, manual at the moment. I'm thinking about adding them to the landing gear, so do let me know if you wouldn't like that. Or if you would, of course. Let me know either way. And then finally we have headlights. Oh, there's one more thing I forgot to show you. Yes. So, headlights. Obviously, when you're sat in the seat, you can press your keyboard shortcut to turn those on and off. But if you turn them on, get out of your ship, and notice that they're on, I didn't want you to have to go all the way back into the ship to turn them off. So, there you go. You've got a switch for that. The one thing I forgot to show you is this ramp hatch over here, which leads to the... supposedly the fresh water tank. This is what's supposed to feed the shower and head, right? So it's accessible there. Right, so that's the end of that segment. So the next segment is going to be her CPU and upgrading. So some of this I've already covered, but let's cover it again anyway. The core is underneath this little dome here. There it is. CPU, she is a tier 3 CPU. The tier 3 CPU extenders are in the engine compartment to the aft of the foyer lock. So she uses not quite 36,000 of the 40,000 you are allowed, so there is a bit of space to play with there. So this slot down here, as I said earlier, is earmarked for a laser drill, which is why she has the ore and wood containers on the inside. Of course, if you want to put a railgun or something else there, you are more than welcome. Another thing you could do if you wanted to was rip all of this up and put a little chin turret there. If you wanted to. As I showed you earlier, there is a slot for a shield, which is up there. That is carbon composite, so it's easy to remove. You would also need to remove the projectors that project the label. And the tier 3 CPU extenders, once you've removed the tier 4s, go here and here, and the same on the other side. You could also do a certain amount of personalization. For example, these are those weapons in order to keep the unlock level down. The unlock level is 12. Now, depending on when you watch this, you may have seen the next ship up. This is actually the weapon pods for the next ship up, which I am going to talk about in the other info bit if you would like to see it. But the weapon pods on the next ship up actually has 2 pulse lasers and a plasma cannon job in this place. That is the ideal weapons, or that's the intended weapons layout. Of course, you can rip these out and put whatever weapons you like. Then, of course, we come to this lore stuff, the role-playing stuff on the inside. Feel free to rip out the shower and the bunk and extend these containers if you would like. you are more than welcome to... Oh, I didn't show you all of this stuff. And mind you, this should have been in the interior layout, but whatever. So there's a few more O2 tanks, and most of the fuel is in here, and the generators are there. As you can see, I've separated most of it, but it's usually only one block. So I don't know if this will still chain react. I didn't bother testing. I should have. I'm too lazy. Okay. Anything else? I mean, if you want to throw more turrets on it and you can find a place to do it, by all means. Right, so that's the end of that segment. The next and last segment then is going to be the other info. Okay, other info. So, Wimpomania naming convention then. You probably have noticed, so this is called the beginner class. The one that it was, so this is now the next one up from Initiate, and that itself was based on what the original starter was. You might see a pattern with its names. So the starter class in StarMade was the first one, and then beginner class, and then I started to build more within that kind of design philosophy. So the wraparound cockpit and the nacelles is what makes a Wimpomania line ship a Wimpomania line ship. That style of nacelle, I should point out. So when I started to fill out the Wimpomania line in Empyrion, I decided that they should all be named, because I consider myself a noob when it comes to building, that they should all be synonyms of either starter or noob, or the synonyms of those synonyms. So the names turn out to be something that means someone who is new at something, or someone who is the first at something, which is why you end up with things like Pioneer, for example. Damage texture I want to talk about, because I always forget about this. So, I paint stuff. I paint everything. Hang on, that was the wrong thing. There we go. So I paint everything with that colour and that texture on all surfaces, so that when you lose a block... I must remember this needs resaving. So when you lose a block, what gets exposed looks damaged. See, to me that looks like smouldering metal. Whereas... No. If it looked like that, it doesn't look damaged anymore, in my opinion. It just looks like it's supposed to be like that, because that's just a block texture. Aye, so that's why I do that, in case you are curious or care. Okay, so as promised, I'm now going to talk to you about how to turn off the flashy lights. Obviously, the flight strobes are easy. You just don't turn flight strobes on. The running lights are always running. So what you do is you scroll to the bottom and find the reg lights, running lights, just here. You turn them off, and then that's it. They will never come back on again because nothing controls them. And then the anti-collision beacons. So these are the red on top, one on the back, and then yellow on the bottom, flashy lights that come on automatically with the thrusters. Well, if you don't like that, make sure that the block group is not active and simply remove the shortcut. And then that's it. They will never come on again, ever again. So yeah, nice and easy, I would say. Righto, I'm going to go up into orbit now to my construction area and show you the next ship. And here it is. And you might now understand why I'm showing you the next ship. So this was actually going to be the beginner class, the updated one. And I wanted the back end of the new beginner class to be big enough to carry around a vehicle. Of course, the vehicle that you have, or that you want to carry around, the hangar that you need to carry it around in needs to be quite big compared to the vehicle. You need at least 2 blocks. So if it's 7 blocks wide, you need at least 9 blocks with a small grid, obviously. So I was building this, and I was looking back at the original thinking it's such a shame that it's so big now, because I like the way that it used to look, this chunky smaller ship. So I still like this, and this is why, and that's why I'm still going to release it. But I decided that I was just going to do an updated beginner rather than a complete redesign. You might be able to see the name there of what the next ship is going to be called, the Beginner, because it's a bigger beginner, isn't it? It's a big beginner, a beginner. Ha ha ha! So there you go, that's what it's going to be, and as you can see, here's the pod that I simply copied and pasted onto the new one, and as you can see, as I mentioned earlier, the pulse lasers and the plasma cannon. So, that is going to be the next ship, and it is going to be just a bigger version of the beginner class. Righto then, that'll be the end of the tour of the beginner class. Thank you very much for taking an interest in her. I hope you get some use out of it, and hopefully I will see you in another video for a different build. So thank you again, and goodbye.